Carly Simon here on BBC Radio 2.
Clouds in my coffee, clouds in my coffee.
Anytime I was in the center of the stage, I was going to panic. When my demons come to me, as they so often do, if I can make it to the piano, I can make it through. I'm prone to depression.
And if it wasn't for that damn cream, there'd be no clouds in my coffee, clouds in my coffee.
I just know that it killed my father, and that I will never sell my publishing because of that. I'm so touched that you wanted to do the story about me.
Carly Simon, acclaimed singer, songwriter, and composer. She is a rare artist, and this is her story, Clouds in My Coffee. Hello, I'm Richard Allenson. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be telling the story of one of America's most accomplished recording artists. She's released 20 albums, and her repertoire includes pop, folk, blues, and her own individual interpretations of the standards. She's the author of children's books and an award-winning composer, producer, and songwriter. She's a singular artist, and one that unashamedly wears her heart on her sleeve. In this exclusive and candid interview, recorded at her home on Martha's Vineyard, Carly Simon tells all. Tonight, in our first program, Carly recalls the songs that launched her remarkable career, and she discusses the lasting influence of her former husband, James Taylor. She considers the enduring fascination of the song You're So Vain, and she reveals her darkest fears.
Because of my shyness, because of my reluctance to be in a group situation, I was always hiding. And so hiding didn't seem to be the kind of thing that would go hand in hand with being on stage, with being a recording artist.
But despite her own reticence, Carly Simon would become one of the most successful recording artists of her generation. And her career did begin on stage with her sister Lucy. With a repertoire consisting of folk music, the Simon sisters played the Bitter End Club in New York's Greenwich Village, often opening for the likes of Woody Allen and Bill Cosby. As part of a singing duo, the 19-year-old Carly Simon felt secure.
As a child, I had a terrible stammer. It was almost, I almost couldn't work around it. So I would say that my fantasies had more to do with being behind the scenes. I wanted to be a spy. I wanted to be a server of great coffees and wines to my husband's intellectual and fascinating dinner conversations, because I imagined that my husband would be a teacher or a literary tycoon or a member of the CIA, but there would always be fascinating conversations started by the man. So I came from a society that you would think would be a lot more patriarchal than it really was, because my mother was in fact a very involved conversationalist and a civil rights worker. But because of my shyness, I mean, that can really affect your entire life. And so I wanted to stay behind the scenes.
But Carly Simon was not destined to live a life in the background. Legend in Your Own Time, from Carly Simon's 1971 album, Anticipation. Carly was born into a world of privilege and refinement in June 1945. The youngest daughter of Andrea and Richard L. Simon, the co-founder of the renowned Simon & Schuster publishing company, Carly Simon's childhood was one of fine literature, classical music, and intellectual conversation. And her upper-class background would later be the focus of much criticism and prejudice in her career. The Simon sisters' performing career was short-lived, as Lucy got married, leaving Carly in the one place she didn't want to be, center stage.
I never wanted to perform live. I thought that would be just a big burden. And because of that, it became hardwired in my system that any time I was in the center of the stage, I was going to panic. My objective was to be a songwriter. So I thought, well, I'll just put these songs out and see whether anybody wants to record them. And as it happened, Jack Holzman, who was the person who ended up buying my wares, Jack Holzman was the president of Elektra Records, thought I was a better singer than I was a songwriter. and he thought he should get in different songwriters to write material for me. And I had to kind of convince him with my second album that I was a songwriter.
Carly Simon had signed to Elektra Records in 1970. Her eponymous debut album, released in 71, didn't set the charts alight. But despite Jack Holzman's reservations, Carly's next album, Anticipation, featured 9 of her own songs.
The recording of Anticipation followed less than a year after the first album, which was called Carly Simon, which had the hit on it, which was That's the Way I've Always Heard It Should Be. Because of that hit, I pretty much was the new girl on the block. And so I had not my choice of any producer that I wanted, but more people wanted to be associated with me because I was on the rise. And so my choices, my 2 choices of that time were Paul Samuel Smith, who was working with Cat Stevens, and Peter Asher, who was working with James Taylor. And I hadn't met either of the artists or the producers at that point. And I was asked to open for Cat Stevens. This was before Anticipation. And so I was opening for him. I had at the Troubadour, and then I did again at Carnegie Hall. Paul Samuel Smith was flown in by Jack Holzman, and Paul came and he met me, and we got along tremendously well, and we decided to work together starting the next month. And so I flew over to England in July of that year, and we made an album which took about 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks. And we were recording at Morgan Studios, which was above Hampstead. I can't remember where it was exactly, but I remember we used to drive to and from the studio together. I rented a flat opposite Primrose Hill, and Paul would usually pick me up, or I would drive with one of the band members who were living in a flat across the street. We would drive out to Morgan Studios, and then Paul would usually drive me home at about 4. I know it was almost light every day that we drove home, and it was just completely fun, even down to the sausage sandwiches, which I never would have eaten at any other time. It was just a great sense of people working together. It was one of the few band albums that I've ever done. There were 3 band members and myself, Andy Newmark, Paul Glantz, and Jimmy Ryan. And then after that, when I began working with Richard Perry, it was who was best for that track. And it got away from the band feeling, and I liked the band feeling because it didn't matter who was best for what track. They were going to play on it anyway. One that I really happen to like because I got a new guitar, and always when I get a new guitar I write a new song, and that new song was Our First Day Together. And it's a very little known song on that album, but it's just me and guitar, and I happen to like that song a whole lot.
Our first day together was after we'd been close in dreams, was after we'd shared hell and heaven, and all the places in between.
Produced by Paul Samuel Smith, Anticipation has remained a personal favorite for Carly Simon.
Paul Samuel Smith is just such an inventive producer, and Julie Through the Glass is another one that I love. And Cat Stevens sang on that, and as did his
Julie Through the Glass, which Carly wrote about her sister's newborn baby. Having won the Grammy for Best New Artist, Carly Simon had much to live up to with her next album, No Secrets. And although it would see her break through as a commercial artist, the 1972 album didn't meet with unanimous critical acclaim.
Intellectually, the critics, you can explain them away, but in your heart and in your gut, they live like tiny little bacteria. And very often they're right, and very often they have seeds of what are right, and they hurt terribly. I once wrote a letter to a critic who had roundly destroyed me for my album No Secrets, and he said things that really struck below the belt, such as that I whinnied like a horse, and he was mean with an agenda. And I wrote him a letter just because I thought on a human level he should know that his words don't just go over my head or just off of my back. And I got a very long letter back from him. And he was grateful to me for asking him to look or to go deeper with it, making him think more about his facilness at being able to write a review that was so unkind.
Critics have frequently been harsh on Carly Simon, and it's often been alleged that her initial success in the music industry had as much to do with her family name as her own talents.
The name Simon, in relation to Simon and Schuster, opened and closed a lot of doors. It made for the invariable jealousy among kids who thought that I was the richest kid in the class, and so they were jealous of me. It made would-be writers and people who were interested in words attracted to me because they thought I was more intellectual and more interesting than other women because of my cultivated upbringing and the presence at our dinner table of guests who might not be at theirs. The doors closed to me when, sadly, my father sold the company at a very early age for a very small price, and it pretty much destroyed his life. That which he had given birth to, he was basically convinced to sell, thinking that he would make a lot of money and would still be in control. Well, he wasn't, and he lost a lot of money. And one of the considerations was it'll be better for the children because they'll go out and make it on their own. That may or may not be true. I just know that it killed my father, and that I will never sell my publishing because of that. It had a negative effect on me, the name Simon, when my first manager, Albert Grossman, said there are only a couple of things that keep you from being a perfect 10. And one of them is that you grew up in a rarefied environment and it made you spoiled. So he was obviously jealous. I mean, he was cutting down what he imagined my superiority was. The song You're So Vain has been certainly more of a blessing than a curse. It's been immensely popular. It goes on. It still gets played. It brings me an annuity. I can only think that it's positive. For people who have just had one hit, I can see it's being a curse, but I've gone on to have, hits after it. It's not as if that was my only hit back in 1973.
Warren Beatty, Mick Jagger, James Taylor, whoever You're So Vain was about, it made Carly Simon an international star and a media celebrity. But why the continuing fascination with that song?
I have no idea. I just don't know. But it's the most flattering to myself response would